You take in a second. There we go.
Yeah.
Hang on 1 second. It's
We're live.
not. What's up, TIW Mafia? JP here, and I am with Big Joe, and we are joined by Jerry Thornton. For those who don't know, you'll see that logo in the background. He is a writes for Barstool Sports. He's also written several books on his own about the greatest dynasty in sports history, I might say.
I agree with that.
And my favorite team of all time. But Jerry, how's it going today, and how are you doing?
No, I appreciate you having me on, Joe. JP, thanks for reaching out to me and inviting me on your little rocket ship to the moon. And full disclosure, the first book is about the furthest thing from the Patriots dynasty, which was the Patriots when they were awful for 40 years. The Patriots of my youth that I fell in love with. But it's called From Darkness to Dynasty, so spoiler alert, they end up being a dynasty at the end. Like you hate to give away the ending of a story, but it ends with them breaking through in 2001 and how crazy that turnaround was. You know what? But sometimes you can give away the ending, right? I mean, like Titanic. You know, I don't think there was anyone sitting there going, "What happens at the end of this big cliffhanger?" Wow, that was a shocker. And you know, sometimes it's right in the title, like Darkness to Dynasty, like Finding Nemo. Like, surprise, at the end, Nemo is found. So, yeah, but I appreciate that. And then the second one, Six Rings, is about this land of milk and honey that we've all lived in for 20 years, but all the craziness that's come with that, like the scandals, real and imagined, the league changing rules, how they went from America's sweetheart to history's greatest monster in the span of about 12 months, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
They went from the Patriots to the Yankees.
Yeah, and even though I never thought like the Yankees, aside from maybe here and maybe Mets fans, I never remotely felt the Yankees got the kind of pure vitriol that the Patriots have gotten. Like, America loved Joe Torre, and you go back a generation, they loved whatever Casey Stengel or what have you, and no one ever changed the rules to stop the Yankees. They just celebrated them, and they've done that with the Patriots on numerous occasions over the span of like a decade and a half at least before they started in on this. And again, wouldn't have it any other way. Eat that hatred for breakfast.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is that are you into all Boston sports? Are you a homer? Is it
yes and yes.
Okay.
Yeah, positively. I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, the Red Sox, we all lived through that era where the Yankees were God, I hate this cliche, but I'm going to use it, the big older brother that always beat us in one-on-one basketball in the driveway, and could hit golf balls further than us or whatever. So back in it was like 2002, I got a call randomly out of the blue from New York City, and it was a guy identifying himself as a producer from HBO who got my name through a comic that I've worked with. I've been doing stand-up comedy since like 1990, and they were looking for people who could talk about the Red Sox for a documentary. And this guy said, I'm a motorsports guy, but I got a huge Red Sox fan. And he gave them my name. And that documentary ended up being called Curse of the Bambino. And I'm in that. And it came out about 2 weeks before the Grady Little game. Game 7. Basically it was, where were you when this terrible thing happened? How much do you remember about that awful thing happen? What's it like being a Red Sox fan and having to go through all this stuff? And, a year later, you know how the story goes. They had the greatest comeback in history. And I said to the Irish Rose, I said, I'm going to get another call from HBO. I promise you. And sure enough, 2 days later, we're doing a sequel. So it was fun talking about the Red Sox and all that. And it's on YouTube. You can find it. Both documentaries, and it won like a Emmy Award. And I was the guy doing the let her roll up along first behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Red Sox win. And Larry Bird was drafted right when I fell in love with the game of basketball. Whereas like in high school, I started playing all the time and watching college basketball, and the Celtics were down, and then Red Auerbach pulls off maybe the greatest personnel move in history. And my first ever hero, and then I'll wrap this answer up because I've been going on forever.
I know who you're going with, and I love it because he was my favorite player back then. So
okay, so I'm about to go to hockey, right? That's where I'm going. Jerry Cheevers, absolutely
I thought you were going to go Ainge coming off of the Blue Jays.
Oh, you know what? I guess I predate even him, but no, Jerry Cheevers. I had the mask that I played street hockey in with the the stitches on, and I have a replica of it. And that, to me, and my beloved Irish Rose, is the leg lamp that was in Ralphie Parker's window.
Yes.
Like if she could get rid of anything in this house, it would be that. And if, God forbid, the house catches fire and everyone is free and safely away, and I've run in and grabbed the home movies and the photo albums, that's the next thing that I'm taking out with me because it's irreplaceable in my world.
Nice.
Now, see, I grew up. I was born in '74. I'm an old man, so I remember because of that, and you'll probably understand this. I really didn't become a Patriots fan until Brady. Literally, the first year they won, I watched every game. But before that, you really couldn't watch every game on TV. There was so much blacked out in the '80s.
Yes, which is a lot of the narrative of the book. It's like how preposterously irrelevant they were. Okay, and here's an old reference, but Amazon, before Amazon was Sears, and you had the Sears catalog, which when I was a kid was around the time you were born. I was a young kid. That was like getting the that was like the kid Bible. It would come right around this time of year, right after school started. And it was this thick with just NFL gear that you could get. You could do your entire bedroom in stuff like pennants and posters and waste baskets and hats and pennants and all this other crap. And at the bottom, underneath most of them in little Agate type, it would say, not available in the following teams: Patriots. And you said, the home games were, for much of a lot of seasons, not even on local TV. And yet they were like that stray dog that followed me home from school that I fell in love with. And my older brothers were into them. And it's like back then when you had the Red Sox, Celtics, Bruins, Patriots, saying the Patriots were your favorite team was like someone saying, hey, who do you like most out of the Three Stooges? And you said, Shemp. Right. No, because no one likes Shemp. No one ever had an episode come on and go, thank goodness it's a Shemp. I was worried it might be a Curly. And yet they had great moments. They really did. They built some great teams, but invariably those great teams imploded like that. And that's what part of the reason I love this era so much, because it's impossible to have stayed consistently, competitively excellent the way they have for as long as they have, and yet we've seen it happen.
The only thing I miss from that era is the prices. They couldn't afford to go to a game back then.
Yeah, that's a thing. When I was doing WEI, which I did full time for a couple of years, invariably when you talked MLB, you'd get a guy calling up, and every baseball call would go the same way. The guy would tell you how old he is and who he saw play. And then you knew what was coming next is how he could walk into the park and buy tickets. So it'd be like this. Okay, Charlie in Revere, go ahead, you're next. Fellas, I'm 67 years old, and I used to see Mickey Mantle play, and I could walk in and pay 50 cents. Okay, because the place was empty.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it was a better place. Like the reason I think maybe I love the Pats first is, they were the first sporting event I ever went to. Like my brothers could get me tickets. My dad passed away when I was like 9 years old. So that thing that I think most kids do, you go to Fenway, your father takes you, and it's relaxing. It's a beautiful sunny day. Didn't happen. So I went to the old crappy stadium, and it just kind of imprinted on me. As much as it was a dysfunctional, it was the Lord of the Flies with goalposts at either end. It was
Right.
fights every 5 minutes, and like drunks falling downstairs and crap. And yet, for whatever reason, I'm grateful it happened.
I can remember going with my father as a kid, but I can remember I more so, and like you said, with the 50-cent tickets, when my friends weren't getting conned out of our money for drinking money from the older kids.
Come on, I did that once.
You just did that every weekend.
I know, so what?
But we would spend our allowance, and it was $7. Most of my friends got about a $7 to $10 a week allowance back then, and that was enough. And it was $7 for a bleacher ticket day of the game.
Yep. Well, and with that, like I remember back in the day as well, you'd have 15 kids pile into one car, and one dad would drive everybody in.
Yep.
Oh yeah, they'd cram you into the back of the country Squire with the wood veneer on the side.
Oh, yeah.
You know, no seatbelts, and because if the car crashed, you would just kind of free fall into the dashboard, right? They just hose it out and sell the car to somebody else. You know,
We used to walk. We used to walk from Copley Plaza. For those who don't know, Copley Plaza is probably about 1.5 miles from Fenway Park. It's not a far walk. But my father would park at the Prudential Center because they had a car washing service in there. So instead of paying for parking, he paid for the car wash and left the car there.
that's genius. Right?
That's brilliant.
When I was like maybe 13 through about 16 or 17 or so, my cousin, who was my best friend, and I had a weird setup. I grew up in Weymouth, and there were 4 boys and a girl in my house, and 4 boys and a girl in my cousin's house across the street. Like, it was so odd. Like, I just thought that's how everyone's life was. So my best friend was my cousin Tommy. Yeah, we were Tom and Jerry Thornton. Yeah, so you can imagine.
I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, we'd be like, thanks, fellas. Never occurred to us until you guys just mentioned it. Thank you. But anyway, for Christmas, we used to get like a package of Sox tickets from our moms. And, it'd be like every Friday night game or every double header back when they used to have like a dozen a year or whatever. And you could afford it. And now I live in this fear that somebody I know will invite me to a game. Because now you've got to do that dance where you go, well, I'd like to go to a game, but you have an extra ticket. Is it going to cost me $130 to watch a baseball game that could end after 5 innings because of the rain, or go until 4 a.m? Like, do I really want that? So, but you know what? The numbers speak for themselves. You know, when they first started charging ridiculous money, they started selling 3 million tickets a year.
Yeah.
Which they're not doing this year, but I don't know. Go figure that.
No, I go once a year. One of my buddies comes up. We grew up together. He comes up from Maryland every year. And we make a point to go to a Patriots game, do the tailgate, and do the whole thing, and just have a good. And for the one game, we don't care, Bingo. But that's an expensive day.
Yeah, and you can also feed yourself in the parking lot, and you can literally go into Gillette and spend 3 hours there and not pull out your wallet the entire time. Whereas like Fenway, I mean, you're not tailgating on Yawkey Way or whatever they're calling it now. You know what I mean? So yeah. So it's per person, you're looking at close to a $300 day just to go see one game of 162. Now people go again. Don't have an issue with that, but it's we can't sit here and argue about how back in the good old days it was really cheap because you could get tickets because no one was really going relative to today.
No. Now we're here. I'm going to ask you about this season a little bit. We're 0-1.
Yep.
How do you think the Mac Jones era is going to go?
Oh, I'm so on Team Jones. And my journey to this guy began last probably November, when the Pats were looking at maybe a playoff spot. And then they lost 3 straight in early December. And I did the math in my head and I said, okay, playoffs are out of the question, but now they could theoretically get Jones. And so, as they dropped in the standings, and Alabama just ripped through everyone as they had all year long. And we're talking in the SEC, which is basically the NFL junior. It's the NFL's like quadruple A league. And watch this guy and his style of play and how he looked against Ohio State in the championship game. And I said, want that. This is for me. And so I do these Patriots draft previews because I don't pretend to know. I don't do mock drafts. I don't know how other teams build a team, but I feel I have a really good track record of predicting people the Patriots would take. So March 24th, I want to say, maybe 25th, I did a preview of the quarterbacks, and I called him the perfect Patriot. Here's why. Here are my reasons. And I predicted they would take him. And so the way the draft board unfolded, there was, the first 3 picks were quarterbacks. You all knew that. And then you still had the Ohio State kid, whatever.
Mac Jones.
Mac Jones and Justin Fields were still on the board. And so Chicago made a move to move ahead of the Patriots. They took Fields. And now I'm looking at the team still out there, and I'm going, not looking quarterback. And there was a trade. On the 14th pick, the Pats were at 15, and I was like, okay, now it's time to nut up or shut up here. And it said the Jets pick is in, and I said, Mac Jones, because the Jets aren't looking quarterback. They have theirs. And again, my lovely bride is going, why are you running around the house screaming? I'm like, do you never listen to a word I say? Honestly, I've been talking about Mac Jones for months and all night long. And so, and then his progression through spring training, spring camp, and then training camp or whatever, nothing he has done has dissuaded me from the idea that he's exactly what they look for. He's not athletic, doesn't have a great body. Neither did the guy who won the Super Bowl last year, the 43-year-old, now 44-year-old. It's what's between your ear holes and how accurate you are, and then you can build from there.
And to be coachable, Brady is a great player. No doubt about it, the greatest quarterback of all time. No matter where he's playing, he doesn't lose that. I may not think he's the greatest today, but he is the greatest of all time, period, end of story. But his first 2 years, he didn't call a play.
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you can actually look back at those games when he first took over in 2001 and say it's not an epithet. It's not disparaging the guy to say he was a caretaker quarterback. The Hippocratic oath: first, do no harm.
Very basic football.
Yes, the team was built around a running game and an aggressive, swarming, turnover crazed defense. But he was huge in big moments.
Now we saw some great passes last week by Mac Jones. Very precise. The precision's there. Does he air it out this week, you think?
I don't think that this system has ever necessarily been an air it out system, even at their best. And we all go to the default setting of Randy Moss, who's an outlier.
Right.
But I will never forget 2010. And this is when Moss had really started to kind of become he had kept a lid on his unique and really endearing brand of crazy for 3 years and a quarter of a season before he just went off. They had a big win. He didn't make any catches, so he went nuts. When they let him go, they traded him to Minnesota. They brought in Deion Branch, who's nobody's definition of a big, ball receiver, and the offense got better.
We made Branch a big money guy. Brady made Branch a big money guy.
100%. Two-time champion, could have won 2 Super Bowl MVPs. When he came back in 2010, he fit into the system and the offense took off, and it was without Randy Moss. So I sit there and the cliche is, oh, you want a guy who can take the top off of defense. Fellas, that's great. I prefer a guy who can pull the defense's top down and motorboat it.
Well, yeah, I'd rather a defense that's going to shut down the offense and let our offense just do their thing.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
I'm a defensive guy.
I love defense. I loved the way they beat the Rams in 2018. The fact that they took, at the time, the 11th highest scoring offense in NFL history, and not only held it to 3 points, they kept them out of the red zone. 11th highest scoring offense in history, couldn't crack the Patriots 20. And I love that. And I get it. Like, remember a couple of years ago, it might have been that season, the Rams played the Chiefs, and each team scored over 50 points.
Yes.
Yeah. And my point watching that was, we've always said you can't have enough offense. You can have too much offense. You know what I mean? Like, at some point, it just becomes, it's not special anymore to watch. Like, if every drive ends in a touchdown, or every deep pass is a pass interference or a completion for 80 yards, does it really get put? Not everything has to be, and you guys are probably old enough to get the reference, has to be the 1980s Denver Nuggets.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where they'd lose games 154 to 146, and you're going like, yeah. Okay. Here's a more recent comparison. Like the steroid era in baseball, it saved the game. I give you that, but after a while, you can only watch so many 13 to 10 games that have 6 homers.
Right.
Whereas give me 2 pitchers grinding it out against each other, and I can enjoy that.
To be in the 40-40 club.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And now it's just commonplace as hell. Now, having said that, watching the Pats last year run the 1930 Akron Pros offense didn't have quite the charm maybe I was hoping for.
Because the only person that got any yards last year was Cam Newton.
Yep, exactly.
He ran the ball.
I'll give credit to Jacoby Myers for the way he stepped up, an undrafted guy in his second year. And, Damian Harris established himself as a pretty good bellwether running back. But, the points were what the points were. They weren't,
know what?
They were
I'm
not
a Belichick guy. I stand by Belichick. I see what he did with but that's where Belichick really excelled, was those undrafted. He did draft. Belichick doesn't typically draft well. He pulled Brady up at 199 a couple, but that was on the advice of someone else. He was going to let Brady. They were going to let Brady sit.
You know what? You cannot chalk that up as not a W in Belichick's column.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And the thing about he doesn't draft well, I'm gonna push back against that, because he has had the lowest draft position in the history of the NFL forever.
This is true.
And there's this sort of like default setting people have, like they started that narrative and they kind of dismiss the hits and focus on the misses. I mean, I can go back to, Logan Mankins with the 32nd pick, Vince Wilfork with the 21st, Gerard Mayo, we dropped back in the draft to get him, but that was a 10. I think that, we see a lot of narrative that, he can't draft receivers. Okay, but look at the numbers, and I won't get too caught up in the weeds here, but he rarely drafts wide receivers. And when he does, he doesn't draft them high. They've drafted just about as many tight ends as wide receivers. And most teams, it's like 2.5 to 3 times as many, because you put more wide receivers on the field than tight ends. Half the guys that he's drafted at receiver have been 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. So that includes Julian Edelman, special teams guys like Matthew Slater, and nobody's like Jeremy Gallen. It's not like he's invested like a metric ton of draft capital in the receiver position the way, say, Matt Millen did when he built the NFL's first 0-16 team. He doesn't value the position. He would rather take a chance on getting a guy like an Edelman or Troy. Well, Troy Brown wasn't drafted by him, but like David Givens, 7th round pick, won a couple of Super Bowls. Jacoby Myers, undrafted. And I'm fine with that. N'Keal Harry, so far, gigantic swing and a miss. That was the time he decided to spend that much capital on it, and it is blown up in his face so far like a cartoon cigar, like Yosemite Sam holding a bomb. And I hope this guy comes back and actually redeems himself, but my confidence is not high on that.
Now, you talked about your EEI days and the baseball callers, and I know for a fact Robert Damore, Bobby D, logged on after that and started listening to us. And he commented on our YouTube, because he messaged me when he logged in.
Yeah.
He said he worked at Fenway Motor Inn as a short order cook and cooked a hot dog for George Scott in 1968.
Oh, my God. My mother's favorite player. Oh, gosh, she loved the Boomer. I love the Boomer. One of those guys who could hit the ball 500 feet, and then just lost it overnight. Just one of those guys who went from this to aging. Some guys have a little slow decline, but he just all of a sudden his swing became like a rusty gate. But what a amazing, lovable cat he was.
And Bobby D. Bobby goes to every pro wrestling show in the area that he can. He's one of our local listeners. So,
by the way, thanks for having me on your wrestling centric show.
Well, it's funny. I didn't realize you did stand up, but we've always mixed stand up comedy in, and we always mixed other stuff. We'll get your opinion on pro wrestling in a little while.
Possibility. Don't let the fact that you've never heard of my stand up dissuade you from the fact that people have been paying me to do this nonsense. 1991, so it's like a few months after I started doing stand up, I won the WBCN Comedy Riot.
Nice.
The following year was won by a comedy team that included a couple of nobodies named Dane Cook and Bobby Kelly.
Who are they?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know whatever became of them. And I took a brief break when I had kids, but I've been back in it. It's fun.
One of those things you find you love, and you just, no matter how far out you get, you always come back to it.
Bobby Kelly hasn't read 3 books, and Dan Cook tells jokes as long as your 3 books.
He tells other people's books.
Oh yeah,
my opinion, guys. My opinion.
No, straight up has been accused. As a matter of fact, last night I was watching Step Brothers, a movie, by the way, that had no business being good, and it is great. Absolutely.
That was Will Ferrell before anyone knew Will Ferrell was funny.
Yeah, well, I saw the premise. And I said, can this really be that good? Anyway, it's great. And there's that awesome moment where Adam Scott, who plays the obnoxious husband, Derek, the one they call Derek, and he's like torturing his wife, beeping the horn, just going, "Let's go, Dane Cook, pay-per-view, 20 minutes." Like, that's how they decided. How would you really express that a guy is a complete D-bag? How about he wants to go home and watch Dane Cook pay-per-view? Or Dane Cook, man.
Sure, Dane Cook's not my type of comedy, but I got to give him credit because he figured out how to market. I compare him to Barstool. The way he started his marketing on MySpace and on iTunes before any other comedy was putting out a single joke at a time like that.
Sure, fair comparison, and again, not every
pretty much started that same way.
Absolutely, he's not necessarily in everybody's wheelhouse. Having said that, last week I had a really great show. I enjoyed the heck out of it, in a small club that held maybe 120 people, and he has sold out arenas. Right. So what the people have spoken. Being popular is not necessarily means that you're great, but it also doesn't mean that you're not popular. Flat out. If a lot of people like you, they can't all be wrong.
Well,
I'll talk to you after about some local opportunities too, if you want.
Yeah, let's do that.
My opinion of Dane Cook is similar to how a lot of young kids these days will like a certain type of music because their friends do it. That's all it was. That's all I see. It's like, oh, Susie the cool girl likes Dane Cook, so we all do now.
No.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that I think that's sort of eternal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess I'm predisposed to having to say music today is all garbage. Well, you know what? Music in my day, there was a lot of garbage too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize to the generations that followed for Aha's Take on Me. That is Drek. And when I say it to people, go, oh no, it's a great song. I'm like, listen to the song. It's hot. It's
on me.
It's hot. It's hard garbage. And, you know, I can still sit there and say, you know what? There's no more Stevie Wonders. There's no, you know what I mean? Some stuff is eternal. There's no Elton John out there today. But, you know, the fact that there are things that people will like because it's cool to like them, that is not a new invention.
But we also live in an era now where Elton John just played the piano for Miley Cyrus covering Metallica on Howard Stern.
See, there you go. And
does that not blow your mind?
How long could you sit through the MTV Video Music Awards?
I didn't even turn it on this year.
Yeah, and nobody did. Like, it's, you know, or even take like something more popular like the Grammys. I can acknowledge that I recognize maybe half of the names and have no desire to. Or SNL. You know, you watch SNL, and when the music act comes on, 90% of them might just go, this is trash. But I have an institutional memory of when I was a teenager, and it was Devo, and I loved them. Mm-hmm. I'd never seen them before, but I loved Devo. Now, would I have ever expected my parents to come into the room? Hey, Mom, come in and see this band wearing upside-down flower pots on their heads and yellow jumpsuits. Like them the way I like them. Like, oh my God, turn that off. And they're not wrong. That's just sort of the circle of life kind of thing.
I watched one of the boxing events. It had to be one of the Paul Brothers boxing events earlier this year, and there was more music concert than boxing.
Yeah,
and I didn't know any of them other than Snoop Dogg did a song with Ice Cube and Too Short and a couple of other older rappers that nobody in today's music knows.
Yeah, it's horrible. To me, it's organized noise.
Yeah, and I knew some of the songs because I guess the way to get a hit song now is to get it released on TikTok.
Yeah, makes sense.
You know?
I mean, I do a lot of trivia, and music is not my strong suit. And my buddy, who's really good at this stuff, invariably, like, let's say it's a sheet of paper, and it's, you know, match the album and the lead singer and the band or whatever. That's when I go, all right, I'm gonna hit the voice room, and you take care of this because I'm, you know, I listen to this music, but I can't identify it. Well, anyway, we did it recently, and it was, here's a clip of a song and identify the artist, and even he couldn't tell the contemporary ones from another, like Ed Sheeran and Niles Horan, and there's another guy with a similar name, and it's just, it doesn't stick to you. It's no one's going to be listening to it 10 years from now, as opposed to the aforementioned Stevie Wonder. Like, I'm in Trader Joe's yesterday, and they're playing one of his songs, and I said to the guy behind the register, I said, have I ever heard one of these Stevie Wonder songs and not been happy? And he goes, I'm in a band and we play two of them, and you know, and we talked about Stevie Wonder for 10 minutes. 50 years from now, no one's going to be sitting there going, well, you know that Ed Sheeran, cannot get enough of him, never get sick of it. Never. No one's going to be doing the autobiography of one of these guys the way they did Rocket Man. Or
I know what Ed Sheeran looks like because they showed him hanging out with in the owner's box last week, Sunday during the Patriots game.
Oh, because, you know, Mr. Kraft, or as I have permission to call him, RKK. I do, in fact, have that permission. I just want to be clear on that. That's official. It's coming from the horse's mouth. You know, he's into the contemporary artist. Yeah. I mean, he helped get Meek Mill out of prison, and, you know, a lot of other rappers. And I am not pretending that I don't listen to yacht rock on a regular basis. Yacht rock, if you don't know, like they did a whole Family Guy episode about it where Peter became obsessed with it. It's like 70s soft rock, Doobie Brothers, flipping was Kenny Loggins.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I do not shy away from that.
Now, I know, we obviously know you're a huge sports guy. You've written the 3 books. Is it 3? Did I get the number right? Is it the 6?
You do, but there's an asterisk there because so I wrote From Darkness to Dynasty, and then after they beat the Falcons, the publisher came to me and said, "Here's the pitch: 5 rings." Cool. So 5 rings came out in September of 2018, and the Patriots made it obsolete in 5 months, like by winning the 6th ring. So I'm like, fantastic! Now I've got the laser disc of books, and so we're able to like repurpose it and kind of do the sequel, if you will, called 6 Rings, and I hope that it becomes 7 rings really, really soon. So yeah, call it 2 or 3, 3 with an asterisk.
Make it like
we'll make it a trilogy.
Encyclopedia. Just send out a compendium, like one more.
Yeah, well, you find out when you have a physical book on shelves in stores that it's not like just releasing the director's cut of a DVD. Like you actually have to they have to take them off the shelves and resell them. Having said that, it's done really well. I'm very, very happy about when I go to like a Barnes and Noble and there's a bunch on the shelf. The next time I go in, there's one on the shelf, and we're on to more. So there you go, kids. Just in time for Christmas, everybody.
Yeah.
Going to Barnes and Noble, you're leaning on the shelf next to your books, like hoping people recognize you.
I don't know how you are with wrestling, but I'm going to guess an 80s era guy.
100%.
So I sent Joe a text the other day, and he told me he can't go to the show because he's going away with his girlfriend. You tell me if I sent you this text in a picture, it's Hogan and Macho Man tagging up as the Superpowers 2.0. Now, there's an asterisk, just like your book.
Okay.
There's a promoter in New York that's booked a guy named Randy Hogan with a guy named Match O Man.
Scottish, Irish gentleman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Apparently,
Mr. and Mrs. O'Man named their son Match.
He's
on fire.
He's the leading Macho Man impersonator in the world, apparently.
There's such a group of those people out there, though.
Yeah,
but imagine like you're putting on a wrestling show, you probably get both of those guys for $20 a piece, and now you get to put Hogan and Macho Man on your card.
So they are the equivalent of like what, say, Joshua Tree is to you too. Like the Patriots at opening game, week 1, had Joshua Tree come out and do their simulation of the halftime show from the 2001 Super Bowl with the victims of 9/11 scrolling behind them and stuff like. All right, get it. I understand the appeal of seeing tribute bands before. Actually, I like tribute bands of tribute bands, like Beatlemania Mania. The Joshua Tree tribute band. What's the Aerosmith one? Draw the line.
I think Draw the Line is the big one.
But like wrestlers, okay, now you're just kind of getting into that realm of, like, I'm guessing that Macho Man is to Randy Savage what the Times Square Spider-Man is to Peter Parker. Right,
Peter's closer.
Yeah, the knockoff Elmo is to actual Elmo. I feel bad for them that they're doing that, and I feel worse for the people who would pay money to go see that. It's like when the Lisa and Bart Simpson went to Camp Krusty, and Krusty was like in Tijuana or something, boozing it up, and like a very drunken Barney Gumble shows up, like you're not Krusty the Clown. I am too, Crunchy the Clown.
The independent wrestling, it's less of a funny place now than it was. There used to be a guy that called himself One Warrior Nation that wrestled out. I think he was from New Jersey or New York, but he wrestled up here in Mass for a few people. that would tell you and would tell podcasts that he was the Ultimate Warrior sometimes for WWF. And then he got to the point where the WWF must have gave him a cease and desist.
You would have to, or if they don't if WWE doesn't completely own the rights to that, you would think at least like Ultimate Warrior's estate would sue him for that.
Yeah, and he did this while the Warrior was alive.
Oh my gosh.
This was absolutely while the Ultimate Warrior was alive. But at that point, when he got the cease and desist, he would answer the question saying, I can no longer answer questions about that because I have got a cease and desist order. So he still wouldn't tell you no.
And then like climb back into the ring with the full makeup on and the long hair.
I did security for a show in New York that he was on. And it was crazy. Like we're gonna, because I know you're not a real wrestling guy, so we're gonna talk like crap.
Just not a recent wrestler, but I you know,
I
respect the art form.
I did security on a show in New York, and the promoter came up to me and said, "You got to come here with me." And he was trying to pull this guy out of his match because he was refusing to lose. He told the promoter, and I quote, "I didn't lose to Macho Man at WrestleMania 3. I'm not going to lose here." My argument for the wrestler for One Warrior Nation was he's right. He didn't lose to Macho Man at WrestleMania 3 because he wasn't there.
Yep.
Like imagine now you've got an ego. You're trying to protect your integrity as a performer when you are in fact not a performer.
But if you say that you write for the biggest sports blog, the biggest blog company probably in the world right now, I don't know many others that are worth the type of money that Barstool is worth.
No, nobody.
You earned that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was there. I was there from the beginning, like when we were making no money and barely, and it was newspapers that were being driven around the city in an Astro van or whatever. And if all of a sudden some guy appeared at like Bar Stool Sports named like Terry Thornton, like trying to write my stuff, I would say like you got to stop that crap. But like or at least pay money to the person that you're ripping off. Like I once have worked it was the Comedy Connection down at Faneuil Hall when it was a big old barn of a place and whatever. And I did a midweek set, and the stage was covered with plastic wrap. Why? Because that week they were featuring Gallagher 2. Gallagher 2 was the brother of Gallagher, who basically leased the act and looked like him and did the exact same act, right down to squishing watermelons. And as I walked up and down on the stage, sticking to my sneakers was the plastic wrap filled with like watermelon squishings and crap. So, but at least the original Gallagher was making a buck off of that. I mean, God rest his soul. I'm so despondent that we lost Norm Macdonald, but I can't exactly just jump up on stage and start doing his like, if we, if you really want to fight a war on terror, you might want to start with America's Haunted Houses. That's his joke. I can't take that. I can't own that. But if you're in wrestling, you're allowed to do that. Yeah, no. Hard no.
It's very it's very, very frowned upon from the boys in the back. The same promoter that used to bring this guy up here to Massachusetts, the one that brought One Warrior Nation up this way, was he brought in, I don't know if you remember Rikishi.
Oh yeah.
He brought in Rikishi for a show, and Rikishi was under WWE contract at the time, but they were allowed to, when they were coming back off injury, they were allowed to do some of these smaller shows, the independent shows, to get the ring rust out. And he tried to pay Rikishi in something other than cash.
Okay, sure. There are two possibilities, and neither of them are necessarily legal.
Yeah, it wasn't a sexual thing. It was definitely drugs.
Okay. Rikishi had a signature move. I worked this into a football blog a while ago. What was his signature move?
The stink face.
Yes.
Stink face. There we go. Thank you for that. See, I'm not
Rikishi,
completely illiterate on the topic.
the promoter says to Rikishi, well, what are you going to do? You can leave, but if you try to leave, I'm going to have all the boys get you. And Rikishi looked, and there's actually video of this on YouTube that some of the wrestlers put out that were in the back, said, who is he calling the boys? I think he means us. So they all left.
Good. So they had a preservation instinct because you did not mess with Rikishi. You know, I hate to be that guy who, like, as I'm making fun of the MLB callers who would get to sports radio to say who he once saw play baseball. But I went to the Boston Garden as a young man, brought a bunch of guys. I had a after college job with a lot of executives and guys in their late 30s and early 40s. And I led a contingent of us to Sunday morning to the Boston Garden for the closed circuit television broadcast of WrestleMania 1.
Awesome.
Nice.
I begged.
How old were you? So you would have been probably 13, maybe? I'm trying to do the math. 12, 13?
Yeah, in that range. The problem was my father had taken me to a couple of those old Boston Garden shows.
Yeah.
And there were more fights in the stands. Like we watched a guy. My father will still tell the story to this day of watching a guy get dragged down those concrete stairs by his feet.
Yeah, that was bad. That was bad juju back in the day in that place.
Yeah, Joe, did you ever go to a closed circuit event or
wrestling at the garden? I went to one, but it was one of the, I forget what it was called, but it was like there was wrestling at the Garden, but then they simulcast some matches from Madison Square Garden.
Yep. Okay.
They kind of did back and forth, and basically the whole premise of it was to set up a next match somewhere else. Like they have the guy in Boston in the ring arguing with the guy in New York on the screen, and then the next week they're in Philly. In somewhere else, and then those two guys are in Philly, and it was weird. It was before the big TV deals.
And that whole time, Joe had no idea where he was.
No.
Just because you said you were from Weymouth, that Rikishi story, and Rikishi actually sat out in front of this building during the show just to let fans going in know, hey, I'll sign your autograph out here. I'm not on the show. It was the Quincy Armory.
He was a class act all the way. That young man. Yep. So I was like, I grew up on wrestling. Saturday mornings, my brother, we shared a bedroom. It's like, okay, let's watch, Vince McMahon. And I mean, just to throw out really old names that will mean nothing to your audience, but like, Bruno Sammartino and Chief Jay Strongbow and Bobo Brazil. And I was a huge hit. Gorilla Monsoon, a guy who was a huge influence on just my sense of humor in general, but also how I perceived sports, how I processed, consumed sports, was Eddie Andelman, who, the sports huddle on Sunday nights was 4 hours of just amazing, like sports as comedy. Whereas if you listen to the other shows, then it was just like, I'm telling you right now, the Red Sox need more relievers, and so wrestling was a huge part of and what they did just as a young kid, I started to really get wrestling because they would embrace like the heels. I mean, I'll never forget like Captain Lou Albano coming on the show and like a woman calling up saying, Captain Lou, I love you. I'd do anything for you. Goes, what do you look like, honey?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty attractive. He goes, I love women. I'd like to have one for a pet. They're like, you know what I mean? And they would have the Grand Wizard of Wrestling, who was a great wrestling villain manager, and he was great. Lord Alfred Hayes, and they try to figure out where he is in the line of succession to the throne of England, and they dumped all over Bruno Sammartino, who was like the golden god, the untouchable. You can't criticize him. And so fast forward to like WrestleMania 1 at the Garden, and it was weird. It was weird for minutes. We're like, all right, we're here. We're in an arena, but we're watching television. Like, and I forget who he was wrestling, but David Sammartino got picked up and slammed into the concrete And the whole place went nuts, and we're going, okay, now we're into this. Just yell at the screen, pretend it's real. And that, of course, was a famous one with Captain Lou and Cyndi Lauper and
The Rock and
Hulk.
Wrestling days.
Yeah, Hulk, and really the birth of it. Hulk and Mr. T, and this is fresh off the heels of Rocky 3, and they were up against my all-time favorite wrestler to this day, Roddy Piper. And his partner was Paul Orndorff, maybe? I should know, but whatever.
Are you at WrestleMania 1? That was the Mr. T thing, right?
Yes, exactly.
I think it might have been Cowboy Bob Orton.
There we go. I think you're right. And there's never been a greater heel. There never will be than Roddy.
The reason they put Bob Orton out there is because they were afraid that those two were really going to fight, because I guess there was some real animosity between Mr. T and Piper had sort of a reputation for maybe really hitting somebody here and there.
Yeah, like with the coconut?
That was an accident.
Really? Because there's a documentary I saw about him not long ago, and it was phenomenal. Like, just you really got a sense of the guy and how hard it was for him to play this heel and then go home and be like a family man, and he had daughters that he adored or whatever, and like just how, I don't know, stoic he was in the face of his own mortality and whatever, and just a phenomenal entertainer, performer, athlete, like all of it rolled into one, and just
one of the best voices ever. Best, quickest wit.
Oh God, yeah, razor sharp.
Oh yeah.
I do want to make sure we tell everybody where they can find you, and we haven't slipped that in yet.
Okay, I write on Barstool Sports every day. 4, 5, 6 times a day. A lot of stuff about the Patriots, but a lot of stuff about pop culture, just whatever's like going up my butt sideways about how terrible the world is, like whatever, just trying to have some fun. I'm on Twitter at Jerry Thornton 1 and Instagram, and there's a Jerry Thornton page on Facebook where I share more of like the things that I've written and videos that I've done and so on. And just started my own Patriots podcast called Do Your Pod.
Nice.
And,
I like it.
Thank you very much. And it's just a fun way to break down every Pats game. It comes out Wednesdays at noon. And every week I have on a different guest. And basically, kind of like you guys, you love talking about wrestling or whatever. Yeah. I said, well, I miss being in front of a microphone. And what's the thing that I enjoy talking most about? The Patriots and utter ridiculous nonsense. So I'm checking both those boxes.
There you go.
Now, how do you go from, not our level. I don't want to put us up like that, although I do tell people we're the best podcast not on Barstool Sports. So
positively, there's no argument. Joe Rogan right now is going, what the heck, Exactly. How can I compete against this? Mark Maron is going, I had Obama, but I never had Jerry Thornton on.
Joe, the day I told people that, Joe Rogan called in sick with COVID. So,
and why they didn't put you on in his place is beyond me. That's on you, JRE, Joe Rogan Experience.
But yeah, it's podcasting now is like, so maybe 20 years ago, Sirius and XM Radio came in as two separate companies, and they sort of took over what was broadcast radio, especially the talk stuff.
For sure.
And then it came into Sirius XM, and then it became all about sort of a lot of music, comedy talk, morning drive time stuff, but not sports. There was a couple of sports channels on there. And I think Barstool Sports is really on that level. Like, you're on the radio level of things. So where do you see that going? Where do you see, do you plan on staying with Barstool Sports and just growing with that? Because that company's grown so much over the past couple of years.
Well, even when I was away from Barstool for 2 years, I always felt ownership of it. Not ownership like, hey, where's my piece of the pie? But ownership like, I'm proud of this and how we're able to build it. And it got bought out by Chernin, which was a big interest, and so now it became a corporation that had like a business model and things that are important, and things that kept me from being a full-time employee, like health insurance and 401k and whatever. And so when my contract was up at EEI and they offered me another deal, I was like, I'm going back to Barstool. They'll take me full time, and haven't regretted it for a one hot second. And I don't want to do anything else. Like, this is what I want to do as long as they'll have me, or until I decide, what, it's time for me to, change my name and just roam the countryside, like solving mysteries, like David Banner and the Hulk or whatever. I don't know.
You're going to put on the lucha mask and come in for the next round?
Yes, yeah, from parts unknown. And but also, like, I think we're also doing the best work out there. You know what I mean? Because the model from us, yes, it's a business and there's a plan, and they understand how to, integrate different platforms and whatever. But at its core, and we're always reminded of this, it's us being ourselves and being authentic. And that's what sells. And, terrestrial radio, I try to listen to it now, and with a few exceptions, because there's still some good shows out there where people are really being themselves, and it's worth waiting through commercials for and all that other stuff. But those are few and far between. And I think ultimately what's great about podcasts just as a genre is it's people being real. It's a conversation. They're stepping over each other. They're interrupting each other. You know what I mean? You can tell off color jokes or whatever. You can swear if that's your jam. But more than anything, it's just a conversation, not an interview.
Right.
Whereas, you listen to sports radio, and I was like, okay, well, coming up after this segment, we're going to get into the Red Sox. But first, we have Peter King on the line, that kind of crap. Whereas I think, you listen to Pardon My Take, and it's two guys that are great together, that are funny and clever and inventive, and they have guests on and they get the best out of the guests. And I mean, that's the future of how media. And there's exact demarcation line. When I was away from the stool and I would be at EEI, and I'd get like people under a certain age would say, "Hey, miss you, man." I'm like, well, I didn't die. I'm just on the radio 20 hours a week. Now it's, where are you? And I go, I'm at Barstool. I have a podcast. And I go, yeah, I don't know what a podcast is. And those are like the people older than me at the gym, the guys with the 10-pound weights, So
the fun Joe called me one day back in 2004 and said there's this guy running this contest to do this internet radio thing. And back then we were the Irish Whip Internet Radio Show, because that's what it was called. And it became podcast a little while later, and that took us a little while to we held off on calling it a podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe because it had some kind of stigma, maybe, or whatever.
I don't know. Yeah, and I think it was like I also invested in HD DVDs when Blu-rays came out. I just made I made the bad choices on that.
When you think about the other shows that did that, at that time, there was 4 or 5 other shows, and we're the only one left.
Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't like it is now. Now everybody's got a podcast. We're lucky where we partner up with WrestlingNewsSource.com. I apologize, Ben. But we partnered up with them, and we get a pretty good amount of downloads off of that. So
cool.
We get to say we're actually successful.
I've had more than a few people that reach out to me and say, how do I get going? How do I want to talk sports? I want to be into the media. And, my advice is always the same. It's, you have so many more opportunities. Like, kids are being told you got way fewer opportunities. You got to go work for a local newspaper. You got to go work in, a place in, Piscataway, New Jersey, and hope that you catch on or whatever. No, you can do your own thing. And I think the internet is very much a meritocracy. Start a podcast, which was unthinkable when I was, say, 20 years old, the idea of doing it. Like, there were 2 newspapers and 3 local stations. And if you weren't Bob Lobel or you weren't Will McDonough, then you had no shot. So now you've got infinite opportunities. Start a blog, start a website, start a podcast, and just do a bunch of flight hours. And if you're good, you'll be. It's like when I broke into comedy. There were 3 clubs in Boston open 7 nights a week, and another one in Cambridge. So you had opportunities. So go do them, pursue that. And I honestly think if you're having a good time and you are talented, then it will find an audience. You know what I mean? Like, don't force it. Don't push it. Just have a good time in the short term, and then keep hustling and have a plan going forward. But just don't obsess over how am I going to get sponsors for this. Like, be good, get an audience. Do Facebook Live, do Instagram Reels, whatever. Do TikTok. TikTok has exploded. It's not my jam. I do it a little bit, but to me, it's all 20-year-old girls in belly shirts, like dancing in front of rap music. But people have taken that form and done amazing things with it. So that's one of them.
That's what JP does in his TikTok. Belly shirts and dancing.
That's why I'm such an avid follower of his. And I love, by the way, your OnlyFans content is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. You're the one, huh?
Exactly. I appreciate
You're right. The internet, I don't think these kids realize how good they have it. Like, some of these kids, I give the Paul brothers credit. I'm not a fan of this, but I give them credit because they've at least been punched in the face.
Right. Can take a punch, can dish it out. Yep, absolutely. And I think that people who are still trying to make them be the butt of the joke, like they're, Michael Bolton, like the joke's on you because and Jake Paul can fight and they have an audience.
Is he going to beat a boxer who's trained at just boxing for years? Probably not, but he hasn't been boxing for years.
There you go.
He's boxing guys that are definitely ahead of his level, and he's where his level should be, and he's beat them. Shouldn't have beat Woodley, but he beat him.
Right, and I don't think he's dabbling in boxing. I think he's worked hard at it, and it can happen. And I think a lot of what we're seeing of the last, like, say, 20 years, certainly with the rise of Barstool, is I don't even think it's a word, so I'm going to really try to pronounce it clearly. The democratization, and I know that's not a word, of like information and popularity. Look, we've got so much blowback, especially in the early days, from the traditional media. People said it's just like, these are a bunch of, and they never even worked hard on the cliche, bunch of guys sitting around in their mother's basement, just complaining about stuff. Well, you know what? We represented and spoke for and reflected the views of the fans, of their readership. During the rise of Boston sports, when they went from, 16 years without a championship to championships every other year, the newspapers were still pumping out, and sports radio, the same negative garbage. Belichick doesn't know what he's doing. Terry Francona doesn't bunt enough, all this nonsense. And like, while teams were winning championships and we were the ones going, this is great. This is amazing. This is so much better than it used to be. And people said, these guys are speaking for us. I don't know who these fossils are that are in the piece of paper that's dropped on my mother's front porch every day. And I think that's what the internet has done. There's parts of the internet that are terrible, but I think it's ultimately been a reflection of it's a mirror, and you can look good in that mirror. You can look like your past time has passed you by.
And what I think is cool is guys like Robert Kraft love Barstool Sports, but doesn't necessarily talk to the mainstream media. And that happens before anything happened. You know what I mean? It was like that. He loves you guys, and that says something for how respectful you guys are. Yeah, I mean, Dave getting arrested at the Super Bowl to go see them was probably helped, but...
Can I tell you that that's my biggest regret, is that happened while I was at WEEI. And if I was still with Barstool, it would have been the Brady Five. I would have gotten... Oh, absolutely. I would have gotten arrested, and I have no criminal record, but I would have gotten one for that cause. And, I mean, look at me, guys. with my body type and my, the high cheekbones or whatever, I would have not lasted a minute in a Manhattan lockup. I would have been traded for a pack of smokes in a heartbeat, and I would have done it for the injustice that was done to Tom Brady.
No, yes, no, but you just mentioned this, and I want to with the stuff with them calling the Patriots the underdogs and treating them like they're crap. I think it was after the 2004 Super Bowl that Belichick got on the mic and said, "Don't worry, guys, they're still going to tell us we're the underdogs next year."
Yeah,
could be. I mean, it was 2003. They beat the Colts in the playoffs, and the Colts were coming off like Peyton Manning had like a perfect game. Their punter never took the field or whatever. The Patriots held them to 3 points, and after the season, the Colts, their general manager was on the rules committee, Bill Polian, and he got them to change the way defense was played in the NFL in order to help his own team. And they go ahead the following year, same situation, only this time Ty Law picked off Peyton Manning 3 times, Rodney Harrison a 4th time, and Teddy Bruschi, to his eternal fame, said, "You know what? The Teddy Bruschi jersey, thank you for showing that." He said, he was interviewed after the game, he says, "You know what? You want to change the rules to try and stop us? Fine. Change them. We'll beat you anyway." And that was just the beginning of the league pulling stuff like this, because they said there's no way the Patriots can actually be this good. You know what? Yeah, they were and are and will continue to be if there's a God in heaven.
He is my favorite all-time player, hands down.
It goes back to bring it back to wrestling. It's one of the Roddy Piper quotes. They changed the rules. You think you know the answers. I'm changing the question.
Yeah, change the question. That's right. And after the story first broke about Deflategate, I wasn't sure what to do with this. It was like a Monday night, and Chris Mortensen posted that tweet at around 11 o'clock, the one about 11 of 12 footballs and they're down 2 pounds or whatever. And I got up at 4 a.m. to kind of get as much information as I could, because I was writing about this now on WEEI. I wanted to stake out a position, and my position was, okay, if this is how it's going to be, lean into it, embrace it, be wrestling heels. If everything they do is going to be like the Patriots are cheaters, then fine, we're cheaters. Go into the arena with your trunks on, and you're just like, yeah, And as I clicked send to post it to the website, the morning show host said, if I'm a Patriots fan, if I'm like Thornton, I'm embracing this right now. I said, I've done the right thing. And I never once had to change my position on that. There's a documentary on Netflix and Amazon Prime. It's available all over the place, Apple TV. It's called 4 Games to Fall. And it's about Deflategate. It's how messages in the media can get manipulated. It's about politics. It's about fake science. And it's got law professors and a guy from NYU who hates the Patriots, but he took their side. It's got MIT physicists. It's got me drunk in a bar. I was
you show the regular guy.
Well, I was the sort of like, okay, now bring out the dancing bear. And but it was like, and I say it not because I meant it, but it's so enlightening about greater societal issues about like fake science that we get thrown at us, but also just about how the Patriots have deranged everybody for 20 years now.
Yes. Now, Jerry, we have to spin a wheel. We give away an action figure every week.
Oh, fantastic.
We're giving away a Seth Rollins Elite figure. I got the wheel set up. I'm just going to shuffle the names for a second. And let's see who wins this week, guys. It's the Seth Rollins Elite figure. You guys want to enter to win this every week, you just got to go on our Twitter at 3IrishBoys. Usually Monday or Tuesday, I'll post what the figure is going to be, and all you have to do is retweet that tweet. It will be pinned. And follow us, of course, in order to do that. So,
I like that tweet.
And we got...
I hope I win.
I can't do this. Joe, how often does this happen? Oh, no. It's going to go to Ben.
All right.
Ben as Bosmith, who is a name that is on there consistently. I love it. I like seeing anybody win, but especially when it's one of you guys that are there every single week. So thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody who retweeted that. Now, Jerry, I don't want to hold you too much longer either.
I want you to hold me all night long, my friend.
Oh,
just hold me ever so gently. No, but yeah, because we'll wrap this up because you guys have wrestling to talk about. Your audience didn't come here to listen to me. Mr. T don't have time for your jibber jabber.
We put this whole show for you.
We've been getting comments on that YouTube all night that they've been enjoying the conversation.
Beautiful, love it.
Now, are you still local, or did you have to go to New York?
I've rarely been to New York. And it was the first thing that Dave told me when we first started talking about me coming back. And by the way, that negotiation lasted about 3 minutes. Just said, "You want to come back? Yeah, full time, sure, okay." And you don't have to come down to, you don't have to stay in New York. You can stay home. All right, cool. And what should I get paid? And like we named a price and whatever. The few times I've been down there, and I haven't been since before the dark times, because obviously,
right.
New York or whatever. And I've been down to spend a day in the office, do some of the radio, take the Irish Rose down. We'll go see a musical or whatever. But when I'm in the office, I've told them, I'm like Creed Bratton at Dunder Mifflin. Like, I'm the old weirdo. I'm kind of not sure who anybody is. You're vaguely aware of who I am, but don't know what I do. And I might be able to get you drugs. You're not really sure. And but the company just has grown exponentially, even in the middle of all the shutdowns and whatever. We just keep adding employees and needing more space. And taken on these different business ventures that have been like wildly successful, and Penn National Gaming has been a gigantic boost to it. So it's amazing that I was there when it was a free newspaper that you would get in the boxes downtown or on the shelf of a bar room, and I was amazed if anybody had ever heard of us. To now, I'm just honestly surprised if someone hasn't heard of us. I just got a text from a guy who's at a Grateful Dead and Company up in upstate New York, and I'd done his radio show a couple times, and he met somebody from Rhode Island, and they said, "What do you do for a living?" And he said, we told him he's on the radio, and they said, "Oh, you should have Jerry Thornton on your show." And he goes, "I've had him on." So that's like, my sister was in Hawaii one time and mentioned her last name, and someone said, "Are you related to Jerry Thornton from Barstow?" She's like, "I've been in Hawaii. What the hell?" So that's a testament to the site, but also to the fans, the readers, the listeners who've supported us. The people have been hired that is supremely talented and taken it to the next level and then the next level. And the management is incredible. They're so business savvy, and it allows me to just sit home in a Bigfoot t-shirt, writing about stuff that's interesting to me, and no one questions it or tells me what to do. So I'm beyond proud to do this for a living, because frankly, I'm qualified for nothing else.
If they ever need a couple of guys to talk about professional wrestling, or if they want to push it as this because it's a sports thing, sports entertainment, there's a couple of guys from Boston, Dave, that would love to have a conversation with you.
Oh,
I'll buy the pizza.
Heck to the unless I take over that gig and say I can talk about wrestling from 1984 to about 1989 and see what kind of an audience that generates. Now, you know what? No, I'd be better off going on and talking about yacht rock.
I know where all the good. You can tell Dave. I know where all the good pizza is on the South Shore, and he's hit a couple of them, but not all of them, and not the best.
Awesome. Well, guys, you've been terrific. Really appreciate you being patient, like as we tried to schedule this thing, and I hope your live show went great last week. And
you know what's funny is the last time we tried to schedule, Joe had a health issue, and Joe actually tested positive this morning for COVID.
Yeah, I was in the hospital. I had COVID in December. I'm vaccinated, and I got it again.
You got to knock that off. How many times do you want this thing?
I just don't want no one else to get it, so I'm taking it all. I'm like the ultimate carrier.
Yeah, it's only on show days. Sounds like a guy who doesn't want to, have to work. And believe me, I worked for the state for 15 years. I know what all the tricks are. I called in sick with SARS, monkeypox, Asian bird flu, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel. I had them all. I had Tourette's.
I miss it when my kids were little. They were the ultimate calling. No one questioned it. Now my kid's sick. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
When you call in with Tourette's, do you throw a few extra curse words in there as you're calling in?
Yeah. Boobs! Just hang up. One time, I used to call in sick so much that one time I forgot what I was calling it sick with. I didn't have anything in mind. The boss said, "So what's wrong with you?" And I just said the first thing that popped into my head. I said, "I've got erectile dysfunction." She's like, "Well, wouldn't that just make it easier for you to come in and do your job?" I'm like, "Nah, not according to you. You said I just sit around and play with myself all day, so I'm not going to do that." Yeah. I was a bad worker.
Now you probably have a sponsor that can fix that.
Yeah, don't ever hire me. Remember this face, and if I'm looking for a job, I will put your company in the bankruptcy within weeks.
Jerry, thank you so much. We are not on your level. We're trying to get there. We're trying to build ourselves, and that's why we like guys like you to come on. Please critique us if you feel free, if you have some time to over the next couple of days on what you think we can do better.
I'm just going to say, Joe, stop growing a beard because I've been working on this one for 6 weeks and I'm embarrassed.
I shaved it this morning before I went to the hospital.
Yeah, I'm so sick of guys with more testosterone than me, which is pretty much everybody. So
it's mostly nose hair that's grown over.
That's absolutely disgusting. Well, you guys are awesome, man, and really appreciate you taking a little divergence from talking about wrestling to listen to me talk about my nonsense. And just real quick, first book, From Darkness to Dynasty, the first 40 years of the Patriots, and the most recent one, 6 Rings, the Super Bowl history of the Patriots so far. If I couldn't make these stories amusing and entertaining, I wouldn't have bothered, but the feedback's been good, and I appreciate you guys letting me plug away.
Into the coming soon book, 7 Rings.
We'll only hope.
Knock on wood.
Isn't the reverse of your first one? That they go downhill from Dynasty to Darkness.
No, we're not ever going to do that.
How dare you? How dare you, good sir? If I'm going to put on a scarf right now just so I can throw it over my shoulder indignantly and say, "Good day to you. I take my leave of you." They're not going to get worse. No.
There's my heel turn.
There you go. It's the NWO, man. Hollywood Joe.
At Jerry Thornton 1 on Twitter and Instagram, if I remember correctly.
That would be correct. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much,
Thank you, Jerry.
for coming on, and everyone, I'll see you next Thursday.
That's it.